How's it going, guys? My name is Mr. Hurricane, and I am here today to recap the first round of the 2014 NFL Draft. The first 32 picks have finally been taken after the long waiting between the Super Bowl, the Combine, and now to the Draft. We had to wait 2 extra weeks this year, but the first round is now over, and so let's get into this with the recap. It got off to a very predictable start, I thought. The top 10 does not surprise me, really, with any of the picks. We got started with the Houston Texans, still taking plenty of time on the clock, probably feeling out trade offers at the last minute, but ultimately they chose Jadeveon Clowney to add to their front seven with J.J. Watt. I'm excited to see what they can do, especially because my favorite team, the Vikings, are in the NFC North, far away from Houston, and they don't play the Texans this year. But I want to see how they use Clowney in their 3-4 defense. It could be very scary pairing him up with J.J. Watt, and I'm looking forward to see the outcome. The Rams next, they chose Greg Robinson, and I wasn't sure if they would. I knew Greg Robinson was a great tackle prospect. I had them taking Sammy Watkins in my mock because I thought that was their best chance to get a big-time playmaker for Sam Bradford, and they could still get a tackle later, which they ended up passing on a tackle. They could have taken Zach Martin at 13. They ended up taking Aaron Donald. I'll talk more about that in a sec, but Robinson is such a dominant player, and in that physical division, you definitely can't fault them for taking a great tackle prospect like Greg Robinson, so I think it's a good pick for them. Moving on to the Jaguars, the first kind of surprise of the draft. This was what I had going to the Jaguars in my first editions of mock. So when I initially thought, kind of like a month ago, I thought they would take Blake Bortles because we obviously know the Jaguars need a quarterback. But in this past week, I talked myself out of thinking like that because they had so many picks. I thought they could take Khalil Mack right there, a blue chip outside linebacker prospect, and then trade up to the bottom of the first round and take their quarterback there. But apparently they like Blake Bortles so much, and I'm not sure if he's going to play this year. I think I was reading things today saying that Henne was still going to be the projected starter, but now I think the focus for the Jags has to be to get some targets in the passing game. They've announced they're not sure if Blackman's going to play. They'd be surprised if he does. So one guy I target to them is Jordan Matthews out of Vanderbilt in the second round. I really like him. He's a big, fast, productive college receiver. But they will have plenty of options in the second and third rounds, especially with guys like Marquise Lee falling out of the first round. So I think they'll have no problem finding some targets for Bortles and or Henne in the passing game, especially if Justin Blackman doesn't play this year. Now we had our first trade of the draft. This is what always destroys our mock drafts. And the Buffalo Bills traded up to number 4 with the Cleveland Browns so they could land Sammy Watkins. And they traded a future first round pick to do so. And now today they've traded Stevie Johnson to the 49ers for a conditional 4th round pick next year. That could turn into a third, but they're giving up a lot for Sammy Watkins. And I can't really blame them with how good of a prospect Watkins is and his dynamic playmaking ability. They have Mike Williams, Robert Woods from last year, excellent pick. I like the move to get Watkins. It's aggressive, and it gets you an awesome playmaker to add to your offense. At 5, we had the Oakland Raiders select Khalil Mack, adding to their defense, which they added a lot of free agents this past offseason with guys like Justin Tuck and Lamar Woodley. I like this selection a lot. Khalil Mack, I think, is going to be a beast, and I want to see how good the Raiders defense is going to be this year with what they've added this past offseason. At 6 was my number 2 biggest slam dunk pick of the day. Jake Matthews to the Falcons was just too good of a fit. Matt Ryan got hit too much last year. They needed offensive line help, and you get Jake Matthews to fall into your lap at 6. Perfect match, and there's not much else to say. It helps fix one part of the offensive line. They have more work to do, but it's a good start towards getting that team back to the playoffs. Up next, we had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers selecting Mike Evans. I thought they were going to take Evans in my mock draft, and that was one of the few picks I got right. With them trading away Mike Williams, it just seemed too obvious, I guess, for them to take Mike Evans, and they ended up taking him at 7. Next was the Vikings on the clock, and again, they swapped spots with the Browns. They did this in 2012 with Trent Richardson when it was still only one spot. The Vikings did it again, must have said there was a bidding war of some sort, and the Vikings got a 5 out of the deal. And the Browns ended up selecting Justin Gilbert, which surprised me a little bit. I wasn't sure when the corners were going to start to go, and I wasn't sure who the first one was going to be, but I think this is a very good pick for the Browns because outside of Joe Hayden, what else do you have? Buster Screen, Leon McFadden. This is a really good pick, so now you have 2 formidable corners on the outside. And then next up was my favorite team, the Minnesota Vikings, and at number 9 they ended up selecting Anthony Barr. And obviously, if you follow me on Twitter, I was upset at this selection, at least at the time. I definitely overreacted. I'm not happy that I did, but I was not happy. I endured a case of Manziel fever last night. I was thinking it was possible, and when he started to fall and the Bucks didn't take him at 7, I thought the Vikings might actually take a chance on Johnny Manziel. And I've said it kind of this whole offseason, if there's a guy to take a chance on, I think that guy is Johnny Manziel. And we'll see if I'm right or wrong. Johnny is not a typical quarterback. He's going to be a nightmare for defensive coordinators to game plan around, and Johnny can be very special. But the Vikings passed up on him here to take Anthony Barr, and I was really disappointed with the pick. Anthony Barr was not someone I really enjoyed watching tape of. He's very raw, only spent 2 years at linebacker after converting from running back, but there's no doubt that he's a terrific athlete. And for Mike Zimmer had to have pushed for this pick for the Vikings. And I like to say that I have confidence in the Vikings coaching staff and Rick Spielman, so I'm getting okay with the pick. It's not my favorite selection. Of course, I like Kyle Fuller a lot, and I would have liked him here at 8 or 9 even. And for now, this may be the most confusing pick of the first round, simply because Anthony Barr was mainly a pass-rushing linebacker at UCLA, and the Vikings run a 4-3, and I'm assuming they're going to use him in a lot of different ways. And where I have questions right now is Anthony Barr's ability as an outside starting linebacker in a 4-3, standing up, sitting in coverage, getting off blocks, and making tackles on the running back. I have no doubt that he can blitz effectively. I have questions about his strength and getting off blocks to make plays when necessary. But what I don't have questions about right now is the Vikings' ability to pass rush in the nickel. When you have guys like Sharif Floyd, Everson Griffin moving inside the tackle like he's done for years, you put Anthony Barr on the outside, Robinson on the other side, no doubt you can get to the quarterback with that formation, those front 4 guys. So there's going to be a lot of different uses for Anthony Barr, and there's not much else I can say. He's an athlete. I hope he can cover. He's a guy who the Vikings timed at 4.47 in his 40 at his pro day. So I haven't seen him in coverage often, but I've been begging for fast athletic linebackers for the Vikings for years. So this could be what I wanted all along, and I just didn't realize it, but we'll have to see. After that, the Detroit Lions, a division rival of my Minnesota Vikings, took a very good player, I thought, an Eric Ebron. This did not surprise me at all, getting a big playmaker at tight end. Pettigrew, they did re-sign. He's a good blocker. His hands are inconsistent, and now they got Eric Ebron. And with the attention focused on Calvin Johnson week in and week out, I think Eric Ebron is an early candidate for Rookie of the Year. That's what I honestly believe. Now at 11, Taylor Lewan to the Tennessee Titans. I was not surprised to see him go after an offensive lineman. Now, who are they going to be blocking for? Is it going to be Jake Locker in the pocket? And who the heck's going to carry the rock when they go to run the ball? I'm not sure what they're going to do, but Lewan was one of the best values on the board at 11. Very good offensive tackle from Michigan. So, not much else here. I just want to see what they do next. At number 12, the New York Giants could have filled a number of different needs on offense. Eric Ebron was off the board, whom I mocked to them in my mock draft. And so they take the next best receiving threat in many people's minds, and Odell Beckham Jr. from LSU. So they're deepening their receiving core with Victor Cruz, Ruben Randall. I'm not sure if this pick is an indication of maybe lack of trust in Ruben Randall or not really liking the way he's coming along, or if it's just a way to deepen up the receiving core like I said. Did not take a tackle here, which kind of surprised me. I thought Zach Martin made a lot of sense, but I can't argue with the Beckham pick either. Next up, the St. Louis Rams took a pick that may give them the best front 4 in the NFL. It may be one of the best defensive lines already, and they're adding Aaron Donald to the mix. Robert Quinn, Chris Long, and Michael Brockers Aaron Donald. That's facing the Vikings in week 1. I'm not looking forward to it. That is freaking scary. Aaron Donald this late, 13. Oh my goodness. He was a top 10 talent. This is, you want to call this a steal almost, but it's at number 13, so I won't get too ahead of myself. But it's just a tremendous value. Excellent pick for the Rams. Next up was the Chicago Bears taking my guy, Kyle Fuller. Cornerback from Virginia Tech. He was my favorite in this draft. He ends up going as the second cornerback overall, which I kind of thought the athleticism from Gilbert and his man coverage ability may give him the nod, and then ended up doing so. But Fuller is a complete corner. He'll come down, he'll tackle, he's good in coverage, he has very long arms. And I'm kind of sad that the Vikings didn't get him, and I'm still going to have to watch this guy twice a year anyway. Now to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I did not think this guy could escape the top 15, and at least I was right in this regard. The Pittsburgh Steelers took Ryan Shazier, and I had some Steelers fans talking to me on Twitter saying they would have preferred CJ Mosley, who ended up going to their rivals, the Baltimore Ravens. Shazier, though, very good athlete, 6'1", 237. He ran, a 4.3, 840 or something like that, and tweaked his hamstring. The dude, if you can keep him clean, if the defensive line can take up space, this guy has range, he can make plays, he's a playmaker, and I'm looking forward to see how they use him in Pittsburgh. Up next was the Dallas Cowboys. Johnny Manziel was available, and even Mike Mayock thought they would take him here. The Cowboys ended up selecting Zach Martin. Very smart pick, building up that offensive line. Much needed, by the way, and so they're going to get a good piece here in Zach Martin. Mayock loved this guy as well. He said he could play all 5 positions on the line, so I'm not sure where they're going to exactly put Zach Martin, but I think they got a very good pick here for the O-line. Up next was the Baltimore Ravens selecting CJ Mosley as they continue to build up this defense after a lot of players left 2 years ago in the offseason. Last year they got guys like Arthur Brown and Matt Elam, and I thought they might take a safety here again, but at 17 you get CJ Mosley, a pretty solid pick if he can stay healthy. And now the Ravens will try to show the Steelers what they ended up passing on with Mosley. Now the New York Jets, they were on the clock and they selected Calvin Pryor, safety from Louisville. I really wondered which safety would come first off the board. Was it going to be Clinton Dix, or would it be Calvin Pryor? Or maybe we'd see a surprise somewhere. Would it end up being Calvin Pryor? They needed the help at safety, and Odell Beckham was off the board, so this pick does not really surprise me, as the safety is probably a bigger need than corner, so it's Calvin Pryor to the Jets, and now to the Miami Dolphins, who took maybe a surprise to some people. I saw this report on Twitter, and the Dolphins ended up taking Jawan James. I was pretty confident they would take a tackle, but Zach Martin doesn't fall this far. Who do you take from the next lineup of tackles? You take Cyrus Kouandjio, Morgan Moses. They ended up liking Jawan James, so I really can't say much besides they needed the tackle, and they got one they apparently liked a lot. Now the New Orleans Saints traded up with the Arizona Cardinals, and the Saints took Brandon Cooks. In my mock drafts, I thought about mocking Cooks to the Saints where they were sitting, but they have Kenny Stills, and Marcus Colston is now 30, so I maybe thought they would go after a guy like Jordan Matthews, who has more size, but I don't think the Cooks pick is a problem either. He's got awesome speed, he's a downfield threat, and they'll find ways to use him down there in New Orleans. Moving on, at 21, we had the Green Bay Packers on the board selecting Clinton Dix. And I definitely saw this pick coming with Clinton Dix falling down the board and not being the first safety taken. The Packers needed a safety very badly, and they got one who has range and can make some plays. So I think that's a good pick for the Green Bay Packers. I think the NFC North as a whole ended up going pretty good. Next up was the Cleveland Browns trading up with the Philadelphia Eagles, a pick that made me pretty sad for about a half hour or so. The Cleveland Browns traded up. Reportedly, the Vikings were trying to as well, but the Browns outbid them, having to only come up from 26, whereas the Vikings' next pick was at 40, so that's a big difference. Browns trade up, and they get Johnny Manziel. So the Browns are one of the most intriguing teams this year, if not the most intriguing. They've had the defense for a while, but not the complete offense you look for. They got Josh Gordon in the supplemental draft. Excellent pick there. They get Ben Tate in the offseason. Jordan Cameron emerges. 80-plus catch year last year. Now you get Johnny Manziel. Opens up a world of possibilities. I'm happy for Browns fans to get a dynamic playmaker like Johnny Manziel, and hopefully he's better than the last 2 quarterbacks he took at 22. But Johnny's going to make this offense exciting, and he's selling season tickets. He's going to sell the jerseys. And it's definitely exciting for the Browns. They could take over the AFC North this year. Who knows what's going to happen? It's nothing but question marks, but a lot of excitement in Cleveland. Next up was the Kansas City Chiefs selecting Dee Ford, outside linebacker / defensive end from Auburn. And this pick did surprise me. I later read that Tamba Hali reported to their offseason workouts or whatever, like 20 pounds over his normal playing weight. And already having Tamba Hali and Justin Houston, I didn't think they would go for a pass rusher this early, but you can never have too many. If I were the Chiefs, I may have gone for Marquise Lee, but there's plenty of wide receiver depth, so if they wanted a pass rusher that badly, now was the time to take him. There's not a lot of great depth from what I've seen from pass rushers. If you want one, you gotta take him early. That's pretty much your best option, and you can get a good receiver in the 3rd or 4th round. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals, a steal this late in my mind. They needed a corner. They got to get younger in the secondary. How about Darqueze Dennard? I still don't know how to pronounce it, and I listened to him get drafted last night. I'm sorry, Bengals fans. But you got the Michigan State corner. I did enjoy watching him on tape. I didn't think he was as good of a tackler as Fuller, but he's more willing of a tackler than Justin Gilbert. Good all-around player in Dennard, and I think this is a very solid pick this late especially. Another corner coming off the board with the San Diego Chargers and Jason Verrett, who was the fourth corner taken in my mind because he's only 5'9". The Chargers very badly needed a corner, and Verrett was basically the next one in line, and despite him only being 5'9", I think that the Chargers fans will really like him. He's got good speed, great coverage ability, and in my mind, he was the best nickel corner in this entire draft class. Next up was the Philadelphia Eagles, who traded back with the Cleveland Browns, and the Eagles ended up selecting Marcus Smith, defensive end from Louisville. I really don't know much about this guy. He was one of the surprising picks of the first round, but again, if you want a pass rusher, you have to know your guy, and you have to take him early, so you can't fault the Eagles for this selection. Who else was on the board? Guys like DeMarcus Lawrence, and there's a couple other guys who would fit what they're looking for in a pass rusher, but you know, he's probably not going to be there when you pick in the second, maybe, so it's a good time to take him if you're really high on him. Next up, another team that traded down, the Arizona Cardinals, who selected safety Deone Bucannon from Washington State. Adding to their secondary, recently they've taken Tyrann Mathieu, Patrick Peterson, and now Deone Bucannon. It all makes their defense even stronger in that very competitive NFC West. Next up, the Carolina Panthers with another surprising pick. To me, like I said in my mock draft video, the most unfortunate spot in the draft was the Carolina Panthers at 28. They were in a very bad spot with their needs. Offensive line, wide receiver, cornerback. 4 corners already had gone. 4 receivers had already gone, and 5 tackles. I'm not sure if they had any offers to trade down. I would have if I were them, but the Panthers ended up selecting Kelvin Benjamin, wide receiver out of Florida State, who helped them win the national championship game. Benjamin is a very big receiver. He's 6'5", 240. Maybe not as good of a prospect as Mike Evans. The route running ability is definitely a question with Benjamin, but it's a big, tall pass catcher for Cam Newton, and we'll see if it was the right choice at receiver, taking him over guys like Marquise Lee and Jordan Matthews. Next up at 29 was the New England Patriots. Will they trade down again? Would Belichick just say, give me more picks? No, they stand pat and take Dominic Easley from Florida. He's an injury concern guy, so that's why he kind of falls this far, but he's an extremely disruptive defensive tackle, and they could have one of the biggest steals of the draft if he can pan out. At 30 was the San Francisco 49ers, and I'm sorry my prediction was wrong. I'm still confused by it. I thought the 49ers would trade up to make a big splash, but it didn't happen. They have a lot of picks now on day 2, so we could see some wheeling and dealing, because I don't think they can take 11 or 12 rookies drafted into camp and have them all make the team. So I still expect them to trade up. They're going to trade up in the second round, I believe. They have the Chiefs pick, they have theirs, multiple thirds. They traded today for Stevie Johnson, so I wouldn't see them trading up for Marquise Lee, but if there's someone up there, maybe Stephon Tuitt or somebody else, I'm not sure, but I still see the Niners trading up because they have too many picks in my mind. But after all this, they stayed at 30 and selected safeties for back-to-back years. This time it's Jimmy Ward, who they'll pair up with Eric Reed. Corner is still a concern, so they may end up trading up for a corner they like in the second. But this is a good move to help build up their secondary. Of course, you got to have a good defense in the NFC West. And I do not believe there was a pass rusher here if you're concerned at all about Aldon Smith. Remember, they drafted Corey Lemonnier last year. There wasn't a pass rusher here worth it, especially over Jimmy Ward. Now at 31, the Denver Broncos select Bradley Roby, the 5th cornerback of the first round. I was not sure if Roby would make it into the first, but the Broncos, they could use another corner. They got to keep Talib in the offseason. Now they got a guy who's a tremendous athlete with a lot of upside if he can pan out. I did not think he had a great 2013 season. The game against Jared Abbrederis, obviously a lot of people go to. Did not have a great game in that one. But still, it's probably a very good value here at 31 to get a guy with as much upside as Bradley Roby. So I think this is a good pick for Denver. And now we'll go to 32. The Seattle Seahawks were on the clock. They were on the clock until the Minnesota Vikings traded up to 32 because they had to get a quarterback. And Houston was sitting there at 33, and Vikings were sitting at 40, so they knew they had to get their guy. Now was the time. The Minnesota Vikings select Teddy Bridgewater as their quarterback of the future, and I ended up being happy after all after the first round. Of course, I was very excited for Johnny Manziel. I really wanted the Vikings to take a chance on him, but I ended up, getting over the fact that Manziel was going to Cleveland, and they get Teddy Bridgewater, who was my next favorite quarterback. A couple months ago, I talked about how much I liked Derek Carr, and I liked him over Teddy Bridgewater, until I kind of watched them more. I think the prospects I watched the most this year were probably Teddy Bridgewater, Derek Carr, Johnny Manziel, and Kyle Fuller. And the more I watched, the more I started to believe that Teddy was the safest quarterback in the draft, and he had a lot of traits that I really liked, and some of them were definitely a lot better than Carr's. Like, I don't think Carr has the best footwork in the pocket, but I think he has an awesome arm, and it might be better than Teddy's. Teddy Bridgewater, maybe you question the arm strength, but I don't think you can question the accuracy or his footwork, his mechanics. I think he can sit in the pocket and deliver throws. And I'm quite concerned about Carr in that simple regard right there, but I still want to see Carr turn out. I think he goes today, possibly. Could it be the Texans? Maybe the Raiders sit back and he develops under Matt Schaub. That would be interesting, but I still like Carr. But at the end, I wanted Teddy Bridgewater more, and that's who the Vikings selected. So Teddy Bridgewater it is in Minnesota. We'll see if he can handle the cold weather here. It's going to be cold weather for 2 years. He might not start his rookie season. Matt Castle is there. But we'll see if Teddy can win the competition this preseason. I'm looking forward to this Vikings offense with Teddy Bridgewater and him stepping into an offense that has a good offensive line, plenty of receiving targets, and Adrian Peterson, of course. And so that concludes the first round of the 2014 NFL Draft. As a Vikings fan, of course, I was angered at first by the Anthony Barr pick. I wanted Kyle Fuller, I wanted Johnny Manziel, but there's a lot of potential here with Anthony Barr, and of course, getting Teddy Bridgewater helped cheer me up after the night was over. So anyway, guys, that is it for round 1. Rounds 2 and 3 tonight very shortly as I post this video. And I might break down those a little bit as well. Probably not every pick, but maybe if there's something worth talking about, I'll come on tomorrow and talk again. But thank you for watching the video, guys. Leave your comments below in the comment section. And I'll see you guys next time. Have a great day and enjoy the draft.